Namaste. Welcome to Our Planet in Perspectives. In today's episode, me and my co-host Jenee will be in a conversation with Izabella Koziell, the Deputy Director General at ICIMOD. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Established in the 1983, ICIMOD has a significant focus on the Hindu Kush Himalayas. Could you tell us something about the priorities and the focus of ICIMOD at the moment?
Yes, we were established in 1983. That's already 40 years ago. So we've been here for 4 decades, and it's incredible to think of the foresight of those who established ICIMOD in 1983 to focus on this really critical ecosystem that is the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And of course, we were established as a regional and intergovernmental knowledge organization that serves the 8 countries of the Hindu Kush Himalaya. And of course, we know how important this region is. It contains the 3rd largest ice mass after the Arctic and the Antarctic. It contains 4 of the global biodiversity hotspots. And of course, its waters and its ecosystem services support up to 2 billion people. And yet we know that this region is changing so rapidly. We have the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and of course the pollution crisis. We're being hit by these triple planetary crises. So there's never been a more important time for ICIMOD to really upscale its work to deal with these challenges. We've heard recently, for instance, on the news that the first week of July was the hottest week on record for 120,000 years. The World Meteorological Organization recently said that we're going to hit 1.5 over the next 5 years. All these statistics are staggering and will impact us very heavily. And so what is ICIMOD going to do about this? So over the last year, we developed our new strategy 2030. We entitled it Moving Mountains to reflect the scale of the challenge. And as we're moving forwards, we've developed a very compelling vision. We want to really focus our effort on building the knowledge and sharing the knowledge across our region to enable our partners, our governments, the investors coming here to really build a greener, more inclusive and climate resilient Hindu Kush Himalaya. And so what are our 3 main areas of focus? One will be very much focusing on reducing mountain risks. So looking at the challenges around the cryosphere, around water, and of course around air pollution. We are one of the most polluted regions in the world, and that of course has impacts on our ice and our cryosphere. Secondly, we're going to focus on shaping mountain economies, enabling people, mountain communities to cope with the changes, rebuild their livelihoods, seek out new livelihood opportunities, but also to protect and conserve the critical landscapes that we have in the Hindu Kush Himalaya that are so unique, so valuable, and stores of an enormity of cultural and biological and social wealth. And finally, of course, we really need to do more across the region, bringing our region together, but also advocating globally and really putting the spotlight on the Hindu Kush Himalaya as we move forwards.
As the Deputy Director General of ICIMOD, what are your main priorities and vision for addressing the transboundary challenges in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region?
Thanks. Yes, so the region is faced with many transboundary challenges. So if you look across the region, we have the challenges of, for instance, water flows. Water does not stop at a border, it flows across borders. We also have the challenge of air that moves, it's not mobile, so you'll have air moving together with changes in weather across the borders. And also, of course, wildlife moves, and we know that there are many challenges that our mountain communities face through human-wildlife conflict. So those are some of the challenges, the transboundary challenges that we face within the region. But we mustn't forget that there are also really important transboundary challenges in terms of the impact that global warming has on our region. And so as we move forward, we really need to be looking at transboundary challenges within the region, but also those that affect our region from other regions, actions and decisions. So in terms of what my priorities are, it's really important that we deliver insights on events and trends that are happening in the region, and that we get them in an accessible format to decision makers, whether that's within governments or within NGOs or within some of our development banks or development partners. It's very important to be able to make that information clear and accessible so that it's easy to use in terms of risk assessment, etc. Second key priority is to really focus on developing the right kinds of solutions for this rapidly changing context that we're facing in the Hindu Kush Himalaya. There's lots of scope to share across the countries of the region, but there's also a lot of scope to bring innovations from outside the region and to test them in the region, and again deliver evidence on what works and what doesn't work. We can't assume that business as usual is going to work moving forwards given the changing context. And finally, to build the capacity, whether that's of communities or the whole wide range of our partners, to be able to respond and tackle these risks. So those are some of the three priorities for myself as Deputy Director General.
What is it that inspired ICIMOD to include the human or the societal component in the new report that's titled Water, Ice, Society and Ecosystems?
Thanks. Yes, so we first published a Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment in 2019. This very much focused on the state-of-the-art science that had been produced right across the region. It really put a spotlight on the Hindu Kush Himalaya, both within the countries of our region, but also globally. It was a really important piece of work and a big first step for ICIMOD to really highlight the plight of the region. But we realized as we were taking this forward and communicating it regionally and globally that we needed to take the next step, which is to look at how these multiple impacts that are hitting the region is really going to affect people, but also nature and obviously the ecosystem services upon which we all depend. And so it was very important for us to include the people and the nature perspective. And so, for instance, to provide some examples of why that's important and some examples from my own personal experience in the region. So, for instance, take the farmer whose crop is completely wiped out because of the increasing incidence of new pests and diseases. And that arises often out of the instability arising from climate change and biodiversity change. Or take, for instance, the example of, I think this happened last year, that there was an unexpected late snowfall which buried and killed entire herds of yak. Or, for instance, the communities whose whole livelihoods, homes, all their assets will be wiped out either by a landslide or a flood. So understanding the impact on our communities and on all those living downstream is really important, and that's why we wanted to include this element in the report.
As per your experience and your work, do you think there is enough action being taken at the individual level?
At the individual level, probably we should all be thinking a little bit harder of what we can do as individuals to contribute to these challenges. There is a lot of wealth of information online to find out what we can do as individuals, reducing our plastic waste, reducing our energy usage. There are a lot of very simple things we can do. But it can't just be down to the individual. It has to be society as a whole that responds. We need to have the right policies in place. We need to then take that forward and implement those policies. But alongside that, we also need the investment. As I was saying earlier, global warming is a global phenomenon, and yet this region is facing the hardest impacts. It's one of the most vulnerable regions in the world. And the scale of damage is enormous. So take Milamchi flood in 2021. It wiped out roads, bridges, the water supply. That cost Nepal millions, if not billions of dollars. Take the Pakistan floods, I think the estimate is 15 billion just in loss, but also 15 billion in terms of economic losses, 15 billion in terms of infrastructure damage. So these are enormous sums, and so no single individual, no single country alone can tackle this, and there do need to be far louder calls for increased investment coming into this region to enable it to cope with these dramatic changes.
In May 2023, ICIMOD launched the #SaveOurSnow campaign, garnering support from thousands of Earth scientists, climate negotiators, environmental organizations, and members of the mountain community. How does the campaign aim to address the challenges faced by Earth's mountains, ice, and snow, and what are the actions being taken to address the goals of the campaign?
Thanks. Yes, we're super excited because in a very short space of time we managed to collect over 2,000 signatures. And of course this was a campaign that was taken forward to mark the first successful ascent of Everest, the 70th anniversary of this. And we were really happy to attract some very high profile signatures. But what was very special about this campaign is that it brought together signatures from the mountain communities around Everest. So we had Kancha Sherpa, who's the last surviving member of this first successful ascent, and his grandson works with us here at ICIMOD as a glaciologist. And we also had several members of Tenzing Norgay's descendants who signed, as well as Edmund Hillary's, and of course PM Helen Clark and Salim El Haq all signed. But we also had mountaineers signing this campaign and earth scientists. So it's a really unique combination of different communities, because all these different communities have seen and experienced the dramatic changes that have occurred over the last 70 years in Everest. I think the figures are quite staggering that over the last 70 years we've lost about 100 meters of ice up on Everest. So it begs you to think what will happen over the next 70 years. So what will this campaign achieve? It's aiming to achieve much wider awareness of this issue. We intend to keep the campaign, keep the momentum going as we move forwards, especially as we move forwards to COP28. We would like now to take the next step to expand this campaign to really bring on community voices, and then take that to COP to really flag some of the challenges that are being faced, and to run this alongside other campaigns that will take place to really raise the profile of the mountains.
You just mentioned that in the past decade the snow-capped mountains have been seeing a huge decline. Similarly, in ICIMOD's recent report, we can see that the glaciers are melting by 65% in the 2010 in the past decade. There's a possibility of floods and landslides. So while we see this challenging scenario, how do you think we can motivate ourselves or inspire ourselves to keep working for climate action?
Yes, thanks. The figures are really staggering and jaw-dropping, in fact. But there are signs of hope. I think there are many innovations and solutions that are being developed. whether that's the use of blockchain technology or new agricultural innovations. There's a lot of potential in green and circular methods. I think there's a lot of innovation even happening in Everest region in terms of recycling of plastic waste. I think the youth have a really important role in really spearheading a lot of these innovations, especially those that come from digital technology. But also if you look at Nepal's success in community forestry, we now have 30% of Nepal that has forest cover. That is really extraordinary compared to many other countries, and many other countries who actually also took on community forestry, and yet Nepal has taken this forward. So increasing the forest cover in Nepal is also an important success. Take China, for example. They're 5 years ahead of meeting the target on solar and wind. So they're going to meet that target 5 years earlier than they committed to originally. So there are innovative ideas and solutions out there. We're also working on establishing what we call a regional mechanism. We're hoping that this will take the shape of some sort of Arctic Council or Alpine Convention, where we can bring together all the countries to ensure that we can manage the region more effectively. This process is already moving forward and gaining ground. So there are hopes. It takes a lot of commitment. ICIMOD were very ambitious, and we really want to make sure that these solutions and innovations are given the chance that they can moving forwards.
You talked about community solutions. Could you give us an example?
Yes, thank you. So there are many very unique and high value products in our mountain region. So for instance, a few years ago I travelled up the Mahakali River to the area northwest of Nepal, the area that borders China and India, and there are a whole series of quite extraordinary products that are produced and can be harvested from that region. So take for example the Yashagumba, the fungus caterpillar. I then went to China and I happened to see that product at the price of $2,000 per 100 grams in a shop, in a hotel. And yet what the actual harvesters receive in terms of the income from harvesting is very low, despite the enormous risks they take climbing up to 4,000 meters on very steep slopes. So is there a way we can somehow bring more value back to those people who are actually harvesting and trading in products such as Yashagumba? But it doesn't stop there. There's also other products such as nettle and hemp that of course are gaining far more popularity on the international market, given the growing trends towards sustainable fashion and the need for natural products. And again, these kinds of textiles are gaining and selling for pretty high prices. So a pair of trousers made from a mix of cotton, linen and hemp will sell for up to $500. So, but how much of that value is being returned to Nepal, and how much of that is being returned to the communities who are conserving, protecting and growing these products? And there are others such as soap nut. Again, these are natural washing products which have arisen through traditional knowledge of mountain communities and are now being sold in organic shops in Europe. And we are working around all these products to look at how we can enable the kind of quality and access to market, but also the kinds of prices to ensure that the price is right, and that creates the right incentive for communities to keep protecting, but it also brings in additional financial resources for the communities.
In what ways does ICIMOD engage with international organizations and donors to leverage support for its initiatives?
Thanks, that's a very important question. So we are, under our new strategy, we recognize that we we need to do far more to advocate in various international and global fora and advocate for mountain issues and for the communities within mountains. So for instance, we are going to be engaging far more in the various UN processes on climate change and biodiversity, but also on disaster risk reduction. We want to come together, and we are coming together with other mountain regions to really raise the voice in these very important negotiations. So for instance, to ensure that mountains are featuring in the various decisions as that are taking place. And also alongside that, we also are calling on the very important issue of loss and damage and the critical importance of decarbonisation, because unless we all make wholehearted commitments to decarbonisation, the costs and the risks and the losses and the damage caused by these climate risks will only increase.
A lot of times, like we discussed before, when people know about the challenges that climate change has brought forward, we often feel hopeless. And especially in this area of digital media and technology, how do you think we as individuals can play roles for climate change and support ICIMOD's mission?
Thanks. So we have one very simple request. We launched our campaign, Save Our Snow, earlier this year, as I mentioned, in line with the 70th anniversary of Everest. So we are now calling on all mountain communities, individuals living in mountains, on scientists who work in this mountain region, and of course hikers and climbers. All these three groups are really the canaries in the coal mine. They see firsthand the impact of climate change on the mountains and mountain people. So we request you all to send in your images, videos, stories of climate impact. All you need to do is post them on your social media and include the hashtag Save Our Snow. And we will be bringing all these stories together to bring this issue further to life.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
This was an insightful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We will be back next week with a new episode. Until then, hope you have a great week ahead. Namaste.